I want to welcome our newest board member, retired Captain Claudia Risner. Claudia, thank you for being on the call. I don't know if you want to offer any entering remarks. You've been a active leader in New Mexico. Would you mind, Eric, and I don't mean to hijack the program, but Claudia, would you mind just giving a reflection on your journey into this work and maybe any observations you have as our soon-to-be newest board member?
Sure. Well, good evening. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm still in Rome, so it's my evening. Um, but yep, I spent 29 years in the Navy, got out, got into politics, kind of tired of the two-party system, not getting anything done. Got on board with VAV, and we were able to participate and help get our open primaries bill passed last session. So I'm feeling great about it, and I look forward to meeting more of you folks around in the other states and doing whatever I can to move the mission forward.
That's great, Claudia. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining, especially from Italy. And I want to put you back on the spot for just 1 second, if I can, which is, what's your words of wisdom for someone that is intellectually compelled by the mission, doesn't know what's going on in their state, maybe nothing is going on? How do you get from intellectual conception that like these are good ideas that make sense and allow participation of more people in our politics into getting something over the finish line? Any words of wisdom for people that are on that starting block?
You just have to be a change agent. You got to find those people who feel the same way you do, that we're putting a lot of energy into this two-party system and it's feeling pretty exclusionary and you don't want it anymore. And you'll find people who are like-minded. And then I think you can look at what some of the other states have done, best practices kind of thing, and see how to engage with other veterans groups. And there still is a spot, I think, in a lot of Americans' hearts for veterans. So we come in with credibility where so many of the other, so many of the governing bodies, the legislative bodies are just they're not revered, they're not respected, they're kind of ignored, they're tolerated. So I think we just have to sort this out, fix it, and work together as a team here. And Veterans for All Voters is a great way to do that. I mean, you've got a great network here.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, thank you, Claudia. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but words of wisdom from our newest board member. And Eric, thanks for the diversion. I'll kick it back to you, brother.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
that's great. That's great, Todd. And Claudia, thank you so much for just living our values and for being a true servant leader. And really what happened in New Mexico is incredibly inspiring. That means there's only 9 states left with fully closed primaries. Some states are partially closed, which isn't much better, but so that's huge progress. And when VAV was first launching back in 2021, we also helped get rid of closed primaries in Maine. So Maine, and the next big state, the next big push for open primaries is in Pennsylvania, which we'll talk more about later. But so thanks again, everyone, for being here. I'm really excited today to feature some new friends of ours from an organization called Independent Center. I'd be curious, just show of hands here, who's heard of Independent Center before? I guess it's a risky thing to do, but so they're brand new and haven't even launched publicly yet. But I first met some of their leaders or advisors at a convening in DC back in February. And one of them is here today, Vance Reavie, who's become a friend. Vance is a CEO and founder of Junction AI. What's interesting, someone who barely even knows how to use AI. Vance is someone who's extremely gifted with technology, and in his time off or as a side passion project, he's got involved with helping to save American democracy by rebuilding the center of the political spectrum and helping independent candidates. Another cool thing about Vance, he lived or grew up in Canada. He's lived in New Zealand and Australia, both places with ranked choice voting. So he's personally experienced that. and then is currently in Bentonville, Arkansas. So Vance, I'll let you share your screen and complete that introduction. And I'm not sure if anyone else from your team's here, but please share whatever you think might be meaningful about the Independent Center and the great work that you all are doing.
Thanks so much, Eric. I'm so happy to be here today. So really appreciate this opportunity, everyone. And man, what a turnout. This is just so exciting. I am a tech nerd. I'm a data nerd, like I'm seriously nerdy about this stuff. So if I go crazy talking about models and stuff like that, just forgive me and tell me, whoa, pull back. But the other part of me is a political junkie, and I have been since I was a little kid. I did grow up in Canada. I was going to be the prime minister. There's just no doubt about it. I moved to Ottawa to university. I realized it wasn't quite that rapid to get there. Became a little disillusioned myself. But like Eric said, I've been active in politics in New Zealand, Australia, and all these other places where I have a plethora of parties to choose from. Yeah, we have major parties in all those countries that do tend to win, but we deny them the majority quite frequently. And so, being in the States for me is just like, what? I've got two, and there's actually restrictions against, the barriers that just make it hard for even anyone to do these things. It just seems wrong. So this is, what you guys are doing and what we're all doing in this space is really a passion play for me. So that's why I got involved when we started talking about the Independent Center. And the goal of the Independent Center is to really to help do the research and provide the insights and support and growth of a movement of independent voters, independent-minded voters across America, and to help use the research and the movement we're building to work with people like you to get these goals across the line, wherever we can do to help with the research and inputs, or however we can help you guys to get these goals across the line. And it works both ways. We need help in some of our things too, events and ideas for research, and where you guys need insights and the work that we can do to help you guys too. So I think this is really exciting where we can go. What I'm going to show you today is some of the research that we are doing. And I'll this is really the backbone of what we use to identify where opportunities are, like in this space. So as you guys know, and you guys have probably heard more than once, more than many times, is that a lot of people doubt there are independent voters. That's the 4 or 5% that are unaffiliated or do care not to select. Sorry, not true. And we've been able to prove that. And you guys know that. I don't need to convince you of that. But boy, the donor community out there and some of the press and Hill community, you do need to convince them of that. So we had to go out there and prove, and we worked on that for a couple of years before launching the Independent Center, to go prove that actually the audience is huge. And you can believe the polls that say, 37, 52, whatever percent of Americans are independent voters now. That is real. Second part we had to go and prove was, sure, there's lots of independent voters out there, but they're just all over the place. They're all over the show. They believe in woolly wild mammoths through to, whatever else, right? So that's impossible to make them a useful force in American politics. Well, we did the data, we did the work, we did the models, and we found out that on most issues, independent voters are actually more cohesive than the voters in the Democrat and Republican parties. So that means we tend to agree on more things than they agree within their own parties. So, I come from a bit of a, private sector and marketing background. Let me tell you, when you've got a vast audience like we have, and they actually have more in common and share more beliefs and values than the others, you have got a winning audience to attack. And the progress you guys are making, I think shows that, in reality. So that for me was really exciting. And that really led us into the next round of data work we do. Everybody knows Democrats have the data exchange, Republicans have the data trust. They're starting so far ahead of independent candidates because they have all this infrastructure support on insights, voter lists, all that sort of stuff. We don't have that, and we suffer from that. And even the media, we often have to convince them to listen to us. And we've just done a focus group on that, actually, and not one of our participants felt the media paid any attention or proper attention to independence. So what we're trying to do is build out what we call independent vision, provide online dashboards so that people can get the insights they need. That'll include information on polling, focus groups, audience and content analysis we do from web content, press, Reddit, whatever it is like that will have voter lists in there. So they combine all that data around independent voters and how to get to them real quick wherever you need to them. And then make sure it's all, secure, compliant management, all that sort of stuff, so there's quality. And we need this infrastructure. We've been doing a lot of polling. Last year, we were very heavy in the 2023 November onwards into the election. We went out there and we did innovative polling. You can see some of our titles here. The West Coast weighs in, the Southern swing states. So we looked at states, we looked at national, we did just independent voters. We did special groups, like we did an LGBTQ one that was exclusive from the ABC to basically say there's many states that vote alone could sway, just that vote. So these were groundbreaking to the media, a lot of them. We got amazing media coverage last year on it. But it also provided geeks like me an awful lot of fantastic data to go through and model. We do vast online content analysis. So we look at Reddit, we're looking at what's happening on social, we're looking for what's trending. What's the language voters are using out there to describe the issues that matter to them? What are the issues that matter to them? How do they frame it? How does the context look? We want to do this ground up. If you use the language people are using and talk about what they talk about and how they talk about it, you have a much better chance of hitting the target, right? And you guys know this already. So, but a lot of people don't seem to know this. They want to produce a white paper at the top and then push it down our throats and think that we should all be happy as voters to just accept that wisdom from on high. I don't believe in that. When you work with retail giants or brands like we do, they don't design the new tide in just the lab. They go and ask, what are the features and benefits you as a consumer want from this product? And then let's design a product. And I believe that is what we're trying to do very much at the Independent Center too. Like I said, I'm going to get a little geeky here. We do some really innovative modeling and data science work. We have a data science team in my company, things like looking at who splits the ticket the most. Well, to most people, this is quite surprising, but it's our technical or vocational workers. Everyone goes after, it's the middle-aged white women in suburban areas, so that sort of stuff. Sorry, no, it's not. We got to get over these popular myths that we've always held that, just even looking at Tennessee 7 right now, I was in a meeting the other day and everyone was going, oh, but that's a boomer district. I pulled out the data on it. It was like, no, it's not. It's a Gen Z young millennial district. That's changed. So we've got to change some of our narratives and some of the thoughts that have just been passed down. And that's what I'm trying to do with the data science, just to say, throw some of that out. Let's listen to what the data says. I'll share this presentation to you after because there's way too much for me to go through in our time today, but do stop me for any questions at any time, please. These are just the type of analyses we do because some people like to geek out on what are your models? What are the analysis? What's the algorithms? And if anyone wants to get into that, happy to jump into that separately as well. So let me jump into a few things that we specifically are looking at. Like I said, we're looking at education levels and how that's going to impact their desire to look at different types of voting systems or different splitting ballots or bipartisanship. Oh, we got a question there already. Great. Lisa. You're on mute.
I know, that's always my problem.
I get that
Vance.
too.
Your data, where are you pulling that from? Is that from all 50 states or is it from the 50 states plus DC?
Great question. I should have opened with that. So what we try to do is this pyramid of data. We like to start on the data that is like the grassroots data. So that could be stuff that comes off social, could be Reddit, could be Discord, could be press and media blogs, just the vast pool of content that we scrape and get information from just general public. Then we'll go up to the next step and say, let's go use the insights we've learned there and go poll, maybe 1,500. And we might do national poll. We might do state-based poll. We might do polls that look at just millennials or, millennial and youngers. And sometimes we do polls that are only just independent or independent leaning voters so that we can zero in on these. And then we go to the next level and we say, now let's do a focus group and let's dive really deep for qualitative insight on what we learned from polling and from the vast audience information. So like from Twitter alone, I think during 2024, we were capturing about 30 million data points during that period just to monitor and understand what we should go poll on.
Okay, great. And I will geek out with you anytime. I went to MIT, so you've met your match, my friend.
You're way ahead of me then. I know a board member who was one of the original godfathers of AI at MIT. He's one of my board members, so he might be more your level, but I'm happy to set you up with our data science people because they're way smarter about this than me. So we're doing this analysis. We're looking at things like, if you're an independent voter, what's your most pressing issue and where do independents differ from Republicans or Democrats? In this case here, we can see our independents in green here. they're more likely to look for a bipartisan solution on immigration, a little less likely on healthcare, so that we can sort of give us some indicators of, oh, well, what do independent voters, where are they coalescing the most on what issues? Where do they see bipartisan as their greatest opportunity? We try to be super efficient because we are a nonprofit and there's only so much money because we'd like more donors, obviously. But we try to say, like, what do we know about voters and what can we predict? So we use a tool, a feature prediction tool to say, yeah, this correlates with this. So we understand if someone says we'd like more choices on the ballot, that probably means that they're bipartisan and they're more independent voting, or et cetera, et cetera. So we can start to predict who our voters are. And that matters when we're saying, let's go buy data from Aristotle or Epsilon or any of the data companies. What are we buying on? What do we know is most likely to give us the best voter list when we buy? And then we're looking at, we like to look at discrepancy in these cohorts to see what they agree on or disagree on the most, because that tells us where are opportunities to capture audience. So, we're looking at, in this case here, I've got some leaning Democrat, leaning Republicans, and those they're independent leaning Democrats, independent leaning Republicans, and those who just say independent, I don't want to touch any party. And you can see in very small print, every one of these is a question from our poll. So we can go look at this and go, on any given question, how much difference are we seeing in the Republican leaning independent, the Democrat leaning independent, or just a pure independent? That gives us some clues of what we need to research more. And then we do micro segmentation, and we all do personas in marketing. And I think you guys are probably pretty familiar with the idea of personas, creating this, what does our typical voter look like? We might have 3 or 4, types of personas, that white educated suburban woman sort of persona that everyone always talks about. We're saying that's not good enough for today, not in the day of AI, and we need to segment. So we do, really detailed segmentation that just breaks down, can be over 30 different groups. This is a Pennsylvania one we did in 2023. And then we look at their different issues, like their most pressing issue, what's driving their vote versus what they think their candidate should be focused on. And you see there is difference in there. And that's a challenging thing, because then we have to think about, well, how do you wrap that into a tidy message to campaign them and actually make it land? And then you have to, fix that to make sure it's for every one of these groups and what they want to see and how they rank these. But that gives us a lot of information. And then we want to understand alignment. And I love using the old 1970s Nolan chart. Some of you might be familiar with it. And I like it because in this analysis, we don't really want to look for the binary yes, no, Democrat, Republicans. Independents don't fit nicely into that spectrum. That's why we get ignored too often. And so we like to use this because it gives us a different understanding. And you can see our blue dots are Democrats here, our green are independent, and our red are Republican leaning independent. And this helps us identify where some of those red lines or issues are. So what are the social issues? If you're going to track the blue ones here, the independent, Democrat leaning independents, what are our social issues that we have to address? What are the red lines they won't cross? And so this helps us understand those. We also look at things like the American dream. We really focus in hard on the Gen Z millennials because they're not affiliating to the parties like us older people might have in our past. And so we really do like to look at all our analysis to segment those groups out and analyze their focus or what that matters to them and how that matters to them. And something we're seeing very much is that the American dream is still very much alive, but it has really changed. It is not the dream we had before. Now they see it as their own personal dream. It is individual. Personal fulfillment has become very much important unless you have very high education. If you have very high education, material success is still the most important thing in the American dream. But these are the sort of things we're digging into to see. So Eric said, do you got anything on military? And we haven't really done a lot of depth on military, but I would sure like to design out some studies and polling on this with you. So Lisa, just tagging you there. let's get down and dirty on this. But we did ask in one of our recent, one of our polls last year around the purpose of military service. Now you see in our questions here, we're mostly not doing just yes, no's. We want these wordy questions. Why? Well, everyone's looked at, ChatGPT and all these great LLMs out there that, Claude and all those things that understand stuff. When we ask wordy questions, we actually get a sense of the language that affects people. So we understand what type of messaging would be more successful with them or resonates with them. So that's why you don't see a lot of just yes, no's in our surveys or our polls. And then we get these interesting results, like this is just independents, and the burgundy is the Republican leaning independent, the orange is a Democrat leaning independent, and the green are just like, we're independent, we're not touching any party. Well, if we ask about the purpose of military, you can see there's a pretty big difference here between millennial and younger versus millennial or non-millennials, so older than millennial. And you can see there's a great difference of that's almost 20% difference there in what they think the purpose of the military is. And so this is really important to us understanding, okay, how are we going to talk to these different voter groups? But then you see what we want to also do is make sure we're on track. Just because someone says is this going to apply generally? This is where I was saying cohesion in the audience. We have to be a little careful because you can see here, independents are less cohesive in their view of what the military should serve. It's the military's purpose. Whereas we're seeing, and young Republicans are actually less purposeful, less have less agreement on the purpose, whereas young Democrats are very much in agreement on the purpose of the military. They have less division across these three answers. So this helps us understand, is this a value that's really core to a big part of the independence, or is it spread out across all the answers? Because that's probably a difficult one to rally an audience to, or have success in a paid campaign, or get an influencer to like engage people on. We do the same then looking at some states. So we did that same question in Arizona. There is a difference. We did the same on Pennsylvania, and there was a difference again. You can see they're actually pretty even here in Pennsylvania. And in both of these aren't independent voters. These are voters overall. So blue, Democrat, red Republican, and green, just all independents. And then we did national voters overall on that as well. So you can see, again, some pretty big differences here. So this is the level of detail we go through on these analyses and questions, so that we really feel we can get a good understanding of what's going to drive these independent voters to take the actions or engage or turn up to the events, or whatever it is we need them to do. This is the key. And I've got one or two more of these I'll show you that are just kind of interesting. And I like this one in particular. When we think back to the 2024 and why Trump was quite successful in swaying younger voters, and especially some independent young voters, and he moved kind of favorable on unions. We all saw that in Michigan. Well, there's a good reason why here. If we look at national voters, millennial and younger voters were very much in support of labor unions helping to protect the right of workers. 40% of Republican young voters, as opposed to their older voters at 17.3%. Vast difference. So you can start seeing that he was actually right to move to looking like he was supporting the unions. And we saw this across a lot of the issues that he moved on at that last sort of month in the election, or last 2 months in the election, to scoop up some of those undecided independent voters, or independents that, it swung Biden last time and now we're swinging this time. So we can see this in the data. That helps us. It gives us the edge, gives us the unfair advantage if we have this data at our hands. There's a lot of these charts here, so I will not go through them all for you guys because there's just too many, but you can have a look. We do ask the alliance, like where they find their alignment. And again, we split it up by pure independents, millennial, non-millennial, all. You can see, independents really, truly see themselves in the center. No question about it. But look at the amount of Republicans and Democrat-leaning independents that also see themselves as centrists. That's our pool. When we take that out to the national voters, you see it changed quite different. Obviously, the Democrats very much Democrats and Republicans very much Republicans. But you can see again here that even in those two camps, there's a fairly significant chunk that do fall towards the center. So there is opportunity, especially in the older older Democrat voters. Big chunk of them here call themselves centrists. Whereas in the younger ones, that number is vastly less. And I know you guys probably can't see that, but 7.5 here would consider themselves a 5, which is right in the middle. Whereas older, 49 and above, would 22% of themselves that consider themselves moderates. So when we're saying where was an audience we can pick up, right there, sitting right there in the center. I'll jump now to some of the ranked choice. I know I've got limited time with you guys, so I'll just jump to some of the ranked choice. So this is getting into the real data science.
Hey, Vance.
Yeah.
Real quick, we have a few questions in the chat.
Oh, good. I didn't see them on mine, so please jump in.
Yeah, that I want to highlight before we jump to the next part. The first one, I think you answered. Claudia asked, how do veterans fit into your analysis? And it sounds like that has not been a component of the analysis yet, correct?
No, correct. And I would love to get into that.
Could I flip the question on its head maybe and ask, like, as we are talking to veterans, are there specific things for us to be thinking about from your research in our messaging in talking about these issues, especially with independent, veterans?
I would like that very much, and I'll provide you a few data points that we would like you guys to check on, and probably we could look at the ones specifically around the two-party system and reform, because we did find some specific things around religion age, and vocation that we found as the key determinants of someone being willing to consider a different voting system.
Perfect. Margot asked, are there new frameworks that we should be looking at for population segmentation?
Yeah, I think that's one of the more interesting things. The ability to use machine learning to what we call dynamic segmentation. So what we can do is we can feed in like all the demographics, and we can feed in all the answers to the issue questions, and then we can feed in all the alignment ones, like where do they see themselves politically, and we let the machine sort it. And that way it can come up with really detailed, like, over 55, no college education, white inner city, blah, blah, blah. Like it can do all that sort of work for us, whereas before pulling that together manually was just a little too hard. And it can give us the percentage and the number in each of those categories. So then we can extrapolate saying, well, Pennsylvania's got a population of X. We know that puts 30,000 voters in that segment. Good. That's a segment worth targeting.
That's a good lean in to Gail's question, who's in Wyoming. She highlights the fact that Wyoming has 600,000 residents, which can make it hard to run these sort of studies and do statistical analyses. She asks, to what degree do you find cohesion between different states?
We find that there is actually a lot of difference between the states. So, actually, I'll answer the first one. Yeah, we did do Nebraska, which is pretty small population state too, but we do try and make sure that we're capturing as much data as possible from like that's why we use the online, what's going on in social, what's going on in blogs, what's going on in Reddit, whatever it is. Then we try to make sure our pool from the poll is big enough to be statistically significant, and then that focus group. So, that way we're trying to cover where we have probably smaller populations that, you might get some statistical challenges. So that's definitely that one, how we're adjusting for that. The second part of that question, sorry, I blanked.
Second part was about cohesion between
Yes.
states. Do you find any? Yeah.
We are finding there is some cohesion, like on changing the two-party system. We've found in the Northeast, Catholicism is one of the big drivers of people that are most interested in seeing a different system. But that didn't play the same in other areas of the country. It just could, maybe there's less Catholics, or maybe it doesn't have that, history and long tradition, whatever it is. We also found people of Latter-day Saints were more interested in it as well, too. So we do see differences across the country. We saw a lot of difference in the millennial voter, or the older voters, sorry, between Pennsylvania and Arizona. There was quite significant differences in what the focus should be. Obviously, Arizona was more immigration than Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was more jobs. So we are seeing very significant differences, which is why we wanted to dive into, like, what does the West Coast look like? What do the southern swing states look like? And I think that's got to be we've got to be able to do that and have that, because we've got to be very, very focused on targeting a state, not just a top of mind national approach, because that's just not going to work as well.
Perfect. And then last question here. Lisa asked whether you define moderate and centrist the same in your analyses.
Yeah, this is a great one. I can tell you, we have had some wonderful heated discussions on what's the difference. Do we say moderate? Do we say centrist? Is there a better word for all of this? And so we did start doing some language analysis by asking it different ways in different polls and capturing online information to see what people call themselves and how they prefer to term themselves. And then we tried to do some analysis that said, well, if I called myself a centrist, how did I describe how I feel about healthcare policy? Well, is that the same as that person who called themselves a moderate? Oh, well, actually, it was remarkably the same. Okay, so in some cases, we don't need to worry about that. So yeah, I think that is one that we have to be a little bit careful on, because different people term these things in a different way. But what we are finding is that sometimes we, as the researchers, get more hung up on the term or the label than the actual voter themselves.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Vance.
Thanks. Please do keep jumping in. I couldn't see there was questions. Apologize for that. So we did a survey back at the end of last year, 2024, on ranked choice ballot and instant majority, and just generally what do people feel about whether the two-party system is working or not working. So you can see here all the analysis we did. I can put a little package together of all this for you guys, because no one wants to sit through this right now today, except maybe Lisa. And we're looking at opponents versus supporters. And even under opponents, what's amazing here is most of the opponents actually feel like people who oppose ranked choice ballot still would like to have more options to choose from. So what that tells me is we've got something really interesting here. And this study keeps going through this, and they say, like, we can do better with, more options, a majority. Traditional voting doesn't work. So 47% think traditional voting's fine, but 37 said we could use ranked choice. Now, what I'm, and again, we can, current system works fine, primary, but most feel we could do better. And these are the people who oppose ranked choice, they say. So what we did was we started then also doing some analysis using other language than just ranked choice. We used words like instant majority. Now, I know when we all get into the details, well, that's different, and this is proportional, and this is ranked choice, and we all love those details. But a lot of times what we found was the voters, they weren't really differentiating between the systems. And, if you put your marketing hat on, wow, instant majority or majority choice sounds so good, because it's like, well, the majority wins all the time, right? So when we did that, we found that people were very much in favor of changing our system. Even those who opposed it, when they were asked about instant majority, were for it, even not knowing that instant majority meant a different way of tallying. They just liked the idea that it said majority. So this is some interesting work that we'd love to dive in more with you guys too, because you guys have great understanding of this, and look at millennials and olders and look at states and all that sort of stuff to say, if we're going to message it and succeed, and you guys are already succeeding really well, but how do we fine tune that even further and get that audience even bigger and make it move more aggressively to goals that you guys we are trying to achieve? And like I said, I will capture this and send this on. These, it is written from our data scientists, so you'll have to just excuse that. Some of you will appreciate it, but and then do fire back any questions on any of these studies, because I can have one of our data scientists for a follow-up session and you can fire away on any of the analysis done here. I will show this one quickly if we've got another second. So more options to choose from. 49%, two parties, 38. If we look at people who split their tickets, they love the idea of more parties, 74%. So think back to those vocational and trade workers that we said were the most likely to split their ticket. We know some targeting now, right? The unsure, even the unsure ones are still pretty favoring more than two parties. If you're, good, either Republican or Democrat in your congressional district, would you still want to see other third-party candidates? Yes, most do, almost a majority. Congressional representation, those who split tickets absolutely want to see more. Even the unsures, again, are pretty high up. Do you think our traditional voting system works, or should we try something like ranked choice? Gotta, remember, these are the people, some of these were the opponents. So, you're not seeing the best numbers. The unsures are a little low on that. That's when, if you keep going down here, we'd say majority voting. You see the numbers change more favor on the majority voting side. So this is where language matters. And I think that's one of the interesting things we're seeing, that we'll have to really work hard on language. All right, I've used over my time, so I apologize for that. Any other questions?
No, Vance, this was so informative. There's just so much data there. And I know there's just like so much more data to dive into.
We got thousands of pages.
Yeah. Want to pause for a second and see if there are any additional questions. I saw one just pop into the chat. Have you analyzed the reasons people are against ranked choice voting?
No, we have not. So I think that's a great one. We should get into it, because we could uncover what the misunderstandings are, so we know what to campaign on to change that.
Perfect. Any other questions from the group? So one thing, Vance, you just ran through a ton of data. Could you talk a little bit more about how you guys are operationalizing it with the independent candidate strategy?
So what we're doing is we're using these data points then to go look at the districts and understand which districts have the best opportunity. And, I think everybody looks at swing districts right away saying, oh, there's a great opportunities. Well, you know what? Sometimes swing districts are pretty evenly divided, 47 and 47 with the two parties. That doesn't necessarily mean it's actually an independent opportunity. So we're trying to say, well, which districts have maybe the religious profile, the age profile, the vocational profile, and we turn up sometimes very lopsided districts. Ones, where maybe there's a Republican that's really not had much of a challenger in the past. It doesn't mean that people, and then we look, what's the voting participation? Has there been a large, are many people actually turning out? If they're not turning out, what does that tell us? What are the age groups of the voters there? Are those the ones not turning out, or are they, going in there? So that helps us identify some other areas. Interesting opportunities turn up in Nebraska, Idaho, Missouri. We're looking at A lot of races right now, we're looking at the district level in Southern California. Big opportunities there. We're seeing a lot of opportunities in New York where there has been play from both parties, but there is a large number of people not voting, or we're seeing that they like, you know, more of our message. We are also using the data from the messaging point of view. So if we can see that public discourse is using our language in an area, they may have never had another voting choice, but it could be an opportunity because they're using our language. So that's an opportunity to go then, let's investigate that district further, because it might be a good one for us. And we've seen a couple in Colorado in that space, Pennsylvania, where we see they're using the language we use. Then another thing we use off the data is any of the campaigns we run, Google Ads, influencer campaigns, social posts, things like that. We're trying to incorporate that language in there. We've been very, very successful. I don't know if you guys have heard about GEO. Anyone who's optimized a website, it used to be called SEO, search engine optimization. Well, now that we all use ChatGPT to find everything and Google tells us the answer before we ever see a website, we have to totally change how we put information on the web to make sure it appeals to how an AI reads it and presents us. And so, even though we're just new last year, we've already turned up at the top 3 results in ChatGPT, but more likely in Claude, Copilot, Perplexity, and some of the other models. So again, that's thinking about what are the questions the voters are talking about online. Let's use that language in how we write our articles and our blog posts, because then it matches what the AI is looking for when you type in that question in Google. That's been very successful for us to grow our traffic. So I think in RCV, that would be a great, like, how do we make RCV, what language do we use to give it, you know, geo dominance across all these chat tools?
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Vance. I think we might move on, but when you send out the slide deck, we'll make sure folks have your contact info, if that's okay, for people to reach out to you directly. But thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
I would really appreciate hearing any ideas or thoughts. So please jump in.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Awesome.
Vance.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Thank you, Vance. And I want to make one editorial comment as well, which is like, just to ground us in the work that we're doing and we know this from data, but it's like, even as people want certain behaviors, they struggle to vote for those behaviors because the election model doesn't allow for that, right? People are forced in a binary choice to sort of not spoil their vote and gain their voting. And right. So like, we really think that very few models actually unlock honest expression of voter preference. And it also requires candidates. And so we can talk about New York City and whether or not, like, the big flaw of New York City is that we just didn't have more candidates. I don't want to call it a flaw, depending on who you support, but it's not a critique of the model, it's a critique of the candidate, you know, pool and field. So the mechanics here very much have a relationship to the behavioral pieces. And I think what the parties do, and Vance, you alluded to this, is they tell a retrospective story that people are not independent because at the end of the day, they voted overwhelmingly for one of the 2 major parties. But that's like a sort of forced choice that people are, you know, forced to make because they don't want to spoil their vote. So that's the sort of catch-22 that we're in, which is why the relationship between the mechanics of voting and then the voter preferences, you know, putting all this together, sort of, you know, really matters. Anyway, and no one knows that better than Todd Achilles, who's in a dogfight in Idaho. So I just want to give him a shout out as well. Anyway, back to you, Alberto.
Yeah, so I'm going to quickly cover just a couple of big things here at VAV and then turn it over back over to Eric to talk about state campaigns and close us out. But the first thing I want to highlight is, for anyone who's kind of worked in campaigns before, usually this is a quiet time. It's the summer, you know, people are still either celebrating or licking their wounds from November. But for us, we have a long eye to the horizon and a team that's working 24/7, you know, year round. And so this has been a very busy few months and continues to be a very busy summer, and just really inspired by all the work happening all around the country. Along those lines, we're really excited here at VAV. We're a growing team. We have 2 interns who are both on the call right now. Wyatt and Holly, both data scientists, studying data science, both in Chicago, doing really cool work for us. And I'm sure we're really digging that presentation by Vance. So excited to have them. We are working really hard to make data-informed decisions, and bringing them onto the team this summer and getting the chance to work with them is really wonderful. And then we'll also be posting a new job posting later on today. It'll go live on LinkedIn for a director of volunteer engagement. We'll make sure all of you have the job posting. Please share it far and wide with folks you know. who might be a good fit for that role. We're looking for people who have really strong veteran networks, have worked in the veteran space, are personable, you know, are part of our culture and get the work that we're doing. But people who can really leverage the momentum and energy of our volunteers all around the country. And so we'll be posting that later today. We'll make sure all of you have it. We are really excited to bring this person on, bring on some more firepower. And we have a couple of other job postings that we're hoping to get up later in the year as we continue fundraising. So we'll make sure you all are the first people to know as those go up, but wanted to highlight that for this group. And pending anything else from Todd or Eric, would love to turn it back to Eric to talk about some of our state campaigns.
Yeah, happy to do that. Thanks, Alberto. Lots of great things happening here at the small but mighty headquarters team. And so real quick on going around the horn on states, cities, and districts and states. If you have an update you'd like to share from your state, just please go ahead and raise your hand. And after my introductory remarks, I'll call on you. Real quick commentary on Vance's presentation. I said this on the last call. As an independent centrist, I've never been more excited in my life that there's new organizations almost every month popping up like Independent Center, bringing a level of sophistication to the independent space that frankly we just have never had before. So very excited. Also, quick lawyerly disclaimer, Veterans for All Voters is a 501c3. We cannot support or oppose candidates as an organization. However, on a personal level, there are a number of our leaders running for Congress this cycle as independents. And personally, obviously, all of us here are free to support or oppose candidates. And we have Todd Achilles here from Idaho, who's running as an independent for U.S. Senate in Idaho. Brian Bangs is up in South Dakota, is running for U.S. Senate as an independent. And then Navy veteran Dan Osborne announced yesterday he's going to run again for U.S. Senate in Nebraska as an independent. So very exciting time. Going on to the states here real quick, and I see Ramon, thank you for raising your hand. I'll call on you for an exciting update from Florida. A couple other states that have a lot going on. Oklahoma, you've heard me talking about, there is a ballot question for top 2 open primaries that was filed last fall. And that's been challenged by the state legislature. They during their sessions, changed the rules to make it harder to pass ballot initiatives. And they made those rules retroactive because they don't want top 2 open primaries. That's being challenged in court, and we'll hopefully have the response from the state of Oklahoma by the end of July. Our friends at Open Primaries are also, they've started a litigation strategy in other states as well, including Maryland, where the former lieutenant governor, a Republican who's an attorney, is leading the legal case in Maryland, challenging closed primary elections under equal protection grounds. And same there, the state of Maryland has until the end of July to reply to that. So there's other states where this is being tried by leaders as well, in Oregon and Florida and other places. So litigation's a kind of a side strategy, but it's also very important. And then on the reforms that we're most centered on, 2 cities that I want to highlight, and I see Lisa Rice is hopefully still here with us and can give a quick update on DC. But so New York City has a charter revision commission. This happens once every 20 years. Mayor Adams appointed this commission to review the city charter, which is like the Constitution for the city of New York, and recommend any and all changes. And so many people testified that they wanted open primaries in New York City, including a number of our veterans in New York City, that the commission, the Charter Revision Commission, has recommended top 2 open primaries to be referred to the ballot for a vote in November. That it's not a final recommendation yet. The last public hearing was 2 days ago. We will know if that's finalized and approved within the next 2 weeks. And so that's a huge opportunity for the biggest city in our country to let over 1 million, it's around 1.1 million New York City residents who are unaffiliated independent voters, including about 65,000 New York City veterans who can't vote in the primaries that their taxes pay for. So that's huge. And then I don't know, Alberto, or Lisa, are you still here with us before we go over to?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Sorry, I just couldn't see you on my screen. Do you want to give us an update on the big push here in DC to get them to fund Initiative 83?
Sure. So we are, I don't know how many times I've said to you, oh my God, it's go time, but it's, it's go time again. In the district, Initiative 83 passed with 73% of the vote in November. We wrote that legislation subject to appropriations, which is how it needs to be funded. This is now the budget season for the council for fiscal year 26. The mayor did not include it in her budget. And there are several other options, either the chairman, the head, the council member who has jurisdiction over the Board of Elections could put it in their budgets, or during the back and forth slinging, a council member could offer a budget amendment act and we would need 7 votes. We've been operating on the assumption that we will have to take it to the bitter end and fight, get a budget amendment in. We have 5 council members on record as saying they will support it. We have a 6th who is closeted because they could not withstand the pressure from the Democratic Party if they were to announce publicly that they would be one of our 7. And then we truly are hoping for our 7th member who is on the fence. I just put into the chat an opinion piece. The Washington Post editorial board published a very strong, full-throated endorsement for funding on Monday, which is huge. The timing couldn't be better. The council chair now has the budget. 4 members of the council have prioritized this. He asked for a short list. So he's gone behind doors with his budget crew. So we're really waiting. He'll turn that around at 11 a.m. on Sunday. So I know what I'm doing on Sunday morning to see if it's landed. If it's landed in his budget, then the people who are sort of staying in the closet don't even have to come out of the closet because that means the chairman's taking care of it. That might not happen. We're just, we're lobbying really, really hard. We are ending up, because the mayor delayed her budget by about 4-6 weeks, we're having to stay in C4 lobbying mode full time, much longer than expected. So I'm raising C4 money. All the things are happening. So that's the scoop from the nation's capital.
Yes. Well, and Lisa's joining us from Ocean City, Maryland. So thank you for, she's supposed to be on the beach, but Lisa is an incredibly hard worker. And for those of you who weren't tracking, like she said, Initiative 83 passed with 73% support for semi-open primaries, allowing independents to vote in either primary, and ranked choice voting. And it's been the Democratic Party in DC that has been the primary opposition to this. So the one thing we know from supporting these reforms around the country, whatever party is in power in any given city or state, they will automatically and reflexively oppose any change to the status quo. So that's what we're up against. And Lisa, you've been doing God's work in DC. The specific ask before, and Ramon, I'm going to go over to you next. The specific ask in DC, if you live there or you know anyone who lives in DC, ask them to send a kind and encouraging letter to the DC Council Chair, Phil Mendelson, and encourage him to include Initiative 83 funding in his budget, which is going to be released this Sunday. All right, so Ramon, I've teed you up like 7 times now, brother. Sorry about that. Going over to you for an update from Florida.
Yeah, no worries. So I mentioned this the last all hands, I believe, but we've been working with the Florida Democratic Party to convince them to unilaterally open their primaries to independents. The Florida Democrats are in an interesting position because they are clearly in the wilderness right now, facing a pretty significant, crushing set of losses in November, and kind of doing a bit of navel gazing about how to better find a message that resonates with voters. And so Chair Nikki Fried, I've spoken to her about this. I think she's very interested in opening the primaries to independents. They do have a First Amendment right to do so, according to the Supreme Court in Tosh John versus Republican Party of Connecticut, where interestingly the shoe was on the other foot, and it was the Republicans who were fighting the Democratic Party in the state of Connecticut to have the right to open their primaries to independents. So Supreme Court says that parties can unilaterally open their primaries and choose who and how to run primaries because it's basically an internal election. So, so she's interested in doing that, but it takes a vote by the leadership of the party in a couple of successive rounds. So the first round at their Leadership Blue conference, we were able to get, successfully past the first stage, which is the Central Planning Committee of the Florida Democratic Party, did approve to put this issue out and supported it moving on to the wider state executive committee. So the Central Committee is like 20 some odd people, and the state executive committee is like 400 some odd people. These would be county, chairs of the county Democratic Party, different caucus leadership, a variety of people vote in that round. And so it needs a majority vote in September to then become policy of the Florida Democratic Party to open its primaries. Chair Fried has also announced that she does have the budget ready to go because she is expecting a legal fight. There is no doubt that the Florida Secretary of State will attempt to fight this because it is a closed primary state. However, there's pretty good legal precedents that last I checked, the Supreme Court and the Constitution can override the state laws in this case. So really the question is, can it get past the internal party resistance? And I'll be honest about this. I published a letter updating our distro last week about this. There are quite a number of people on the progressive wing of the party who are very concerned about allowing independents to be involved in choosing their candidates. And so that's just the reality of what we're trying to deal with. So what we've been trying to do as a nonprofit is get other nonprofits who represent different communities to endorse this plan. And the League of Women Voters at their state convention in June did exactly that, which has been great. The Alianza for Progress, which is a big Hispanic group in Florida, issued a letter. And of course, you all we all at Veterans for All Voters did the same. And I really appreciate Alberto and Eric, honchoing that, because I do think that, there's 1.5 million veterans in Florida, overwhelmingly independent voters. And so that's a large group that a lot of people don't talk about as essentially a minority group that is disenfranchised by this policy. And so it was very helpful to have that endorsement from Veterans for All Voters in the discussion. So Chair Fried was very appreciative of those endorsement letters. And I think that really helped bolster her internal conversations, at least in the Central Committee. And now we got to do the work between now and September to make sure that we line up support in that wider state executive committee. So I know it's going to be a challenge. And so we're trying to find as many friends as we can between now and then. So
nice. All right. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for the good work and the update, Ramon.
Absolutely.
So in the 5 minutes we have left, I'm going to mention 2 more states. And then if you have a quick update from your city or state, please feel free to raise your hand. One is Nevada. There was a bill that got to the governor's desk that would have allowed independents to vote in either the Republican or Democratic primary. And the governor vetoed that bill, which was expected, but that means that we just have to come back stronger next year and, do some lobbying and advocacy work there in Nevada. And then Alaska, I feel like we've seen this movie before, but again, the opposition in Alaska is trying to repeal. In Alaska, they just refer to it as ranked choice voting. It's a top 4 open primary with an instant runoff in the November general election. And the opponents are trying to appeal it again. They're gathering signatures. Brian, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add or share. Brian Schroeder, retired Coast Guard veteran and former Attorney General for the state of Alaska, who's one of our most loyal and steadfast leaders up there. Brian?
Not a lot to add. I met with the director of Alaskans for Better Elections, which is the group that moved the original initiative forward 4 years ago or 3.5 years ago, and has been defending it since. So yeah, the process of the group that's got the new initiative coming, they're moving forward slightly, but it's still relatively early. ABE's taken the position that they want to use this, at least the rest of this year, as an educational opportunity to kind of go out and educate people about how, the advantages of open primaries and ranked choice voting, including reaching out to make sure the Republicans in the state understand that they had a really problem House of Representatives member up in the Wasilla area that they wanted to get rid of for years. And finally, RCV allowed them to get rid of the guy last year. So the group that took the biggest advantage of ranked choice voting in the last election in Alaska were the Republicans. So, we want to remind them of that. And that works pretty well with what we want to do on the veteran side for the remainder of this year too. So not a lot of big activity, but I think some important things we're going to do in the next few months.
Awesome. And Brian, sorry, I misspoke. You were the former U.S. attorney for the state of Alaska. I misspoke. Thanks, Todd, for the help there. All right. Anyone else going once, going twice? Todd or Alberto, you have any parting thoughts?
No, turn it over to Todd to close us out.
No, nothing specific for me. Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Brian, Ramon, and Lisa, and everyone who's on the front lines doing this work. And I would just say this, and I'm trying to do this for myself, I encourage you to sort of just develop a point of view from the place that you live and the place that you sit about what's going on with the elections. Particularly if there's an upcoming election, feel free to write an op-ed like a week after to sort of diagnose it in your own terms. There's so many quiet spaces where the political parties stop talking to voters. And I think that's our opportunity. It's like right now before an election, right after an election. Like in Illinois here, we're staring down an election. There's a couple members that have announced their retirement for Congress, and there's 10 Democrats lining up on each side to run for those seats. And it's going to be a low turnout Democratic primary. And I'm getting ready to talk about how whoever wins is going to have done it with small margins. 14% of the vote in a Democratic primary is how you will win the 9th congressional district seat for Congress. And that's a pathetic stat, regardless of who wins. And maybe someone good will win. But that's the kind of stuff that we can be talking about. And I just want to encourage everyone, don't wait for sort of a call from us to make that happen. Like develop a point of view, see what's going on, start talking about it, bring others into the conversation, bring one more person onto the call, preferably someone that doesn't look like you, that maybe even politically is different from you, but bring them onto the call, bring them into the conversation, and let's grow this thing, because I'm just so convicted. I've never been more convicted that we are onto something critical. And it's the people on this call that are going to make it happen. And history proves that this sort of progressive movements like this kind of emerge in 70-year cycles and kind of get this thing back in the hands of Americans, away from political power brokers. So we're just on time for this work, to be doing this together. So just huge gratitude to everyone. Lisa, I'll give you the final word.
Thanks. And I know that Eric mentioned if you live in DC, write to Chairman Mendelson. I put the op-ed from the editorial board, not the op-ed, but the editorial board endorsement. I put that in the chat. Grab that, please. You don't have to be a DC resident to read it and to comment online. The more comments that come in online, they don't know where you're from. Please, it helps every bit of this, because these council members read the posts, they read the comments. So you don't live in DC, fine. Comment on that piece from the editorial board. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks everyone for what you're doing. If we can be helpful, reach out, and huge gratitude to each of you. Thanks, Eric and Alberto. Appreciate you guys.
Good to see everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great summer. Keep pressing on.
Thanks, everybody.